Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Noor Podcast. Today on our episode, we have Laura. And before we get right into that, and I'm very excited. I haven't heard anything yet about her story, so I'm very excited. I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the attention you've been giving us online. I hope you've been really enjoying the guests we have and learning from them just as much as we have. And we are very excited to keep growing this over the course of the year and getting some really, really interesting, fascinating people on board. And about that as well, the goal of this podcast is try to answer the question, what do I want to do with my life? And we want to interview people that have found that meaning and purpose in their life of what they do, regardless of what it is. And we also really are a strong advocate for the fact that Adelaide is filled with a lot of really fascinating, interesting people, and we really shoot above our weight with what we.
I think it's a secret society. Isn't it?
I think so.
You have to go and dig and find them. Beg them, come, please share your story. We just, if you know any really interesting people, you wanted to come and have a chat about your life and what you've done, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to accommodate you. But without further ado, I'd love to learn more about you, Laura.
Well, thank you for having me. I don't know if I can live up to that sort of interesting intro, but I agree that Adelaide has a subculture of interesting people, and I think maybe they're all introverts, so they don't ever meet each other. But I'm glad to be here and meeting new people in the same sort of space, interested in the same things. So my story, I actually started, I don't know, where do you start? Education-wise, I started at uni doing law and an arts degree. And by the time I was in third year, I knew I didn't want to do it anymore, but I was too far in to give up. So I finished my law degree and then had a gap year trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and kept coming back to tech. So was interested in making things, interested in fixing things, in problems as well as actual things. And that sort of led me to my path, down the path where I am now, which is trying my hand at startups and trying to make these products that I've sort of dreamed of and have found gaps in my life that I wanted to fill. But more so wanted to give other people the opportunity to grow and to find use in technology.
Yeah, wow. Before we head straight into the present, I'm just curious as well. You've obviously done a law degree, 4 years, right? What's maybe the
5 years?
5 years? Oh, sorry, I don't know.
5 or double, yeah.
5 years. Oh,
And then you have another extra 2 years for the law exam.
Well, so you have to go back. You have to do a graduate diploma to actually be admitted as a lawyer. So I actually spent several years working in tech, and then I felt like that was unfinished.
Oh.
Went back and did my graduate diploma, and then I got admitted, and through that process you have to work in a law firm and be a lawyer with basically no power to do anything, but you get your full experience of what it's like to work in a law firm. And that was enough for me to realize the day-to-day of working in law wasn't for me. But I do think there are some carryovers between law and tech that I sort of brought with me through these startups, which was more that both are serving a purpose to encourage society to be the best it can be. And I think, interestingly, tech is sort of on a totem pole in how that's going to go in the future. So that's a really interesting, for me, a really interesting thought space of where are we going with technology, particularly with AI. So
you have never left law, literally. So you're always sort of on the edge.
Well, in terms of a thought process, I think, and one thing that doing a law degree does do for you is give you a lot of practice in critical analysis.
Yeah.
And applying that in other fields has been a really fun way to explore all of that learning, which it's been really rewarding.
Well, you just answered the question I was going to ask, which was what did you learn from your law degree that you apply? But wow,
Yeah.
okay. So critical analysis. Could you go into what do you mean by that? Like,
I
and
think,
how do you apply that in like a tech space?
I think that taking something at face value can be quite an easy thing to do, especially if you're in a professional setting or you're just trying to get things done. But having that pause to look at the pros and cons, the for and against, the possibilities outside of what you're presented with is that sort of critical analysis. And I think to translate that over to tech, it's about looking at, well, what is the potential of this product, or what is the potential of this problem we're trying to solve? Like, you know, how bad could it be, or how good can we make it? And you're constantly analyzing what you want to contribute through whatever power you have in that work.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, I did enjoy my law degree, as it was challenging at times, and there was a lot of cramming and a lot of like all those sorts of things that everyone has at university. But I often look back and think, you know, what would I do instead? And there's nothing else. So I do think I found the right path in terms of the study. It was more that after the fact, I wanted to apply in a different realm. So,
and at what point in your life did you get exposed to that tech that you fell in love with?
That's a good question. Actually, my dad was also always very interested and engaged with technology. So I'm a 90s baby. So back in the 90s, like, and even before then, he was just ahead of the game. Like, he just knew about mostly hardware, but software as well. Like, he just knew what he was doing. He understood the technology as it was developing and rolling out. And at that time, like, there were huge jumps in technology with the internet.
Yeah. And
also, so I think that there was a natural exposure at home to just problem solving and applying, well, troubleshooting really. Like, you know, like the printer's broken, try and fix it. And I think that's actually been the bedrock of my approach to tech, has been like, this thing has been designed intentionally, and it's to make your life, it's to complement your life. And if there's a problem with it, work backwards and see, like, what's in the way of it doing that? You know, like, what is in the way of this thing not working or this app not functioning right? And then you can usually go forward again and see, right, okay, I can see what the engineers were trying to do or whatever it is. And you can kind of like, you get beneath the surface of what the technology actually is and what the meaning is. Because I think it can be a scary thing to have all of these gadgets and this fast moving like culture around what software is like the latest and best and all of these sorts of things. But it's like, well, what does it actually mean to your life? Like, what's it contributing to you? And I find that approach the way that I can understand.
I see
that. So
when you said you wouldn't go back and, you know, you wouldn't have done something else, and you're also in the tech space, I have to ask, as an engineer, you never thought about it?
Well, I think that definitely thought, but I think that realistically, my skills were more in the creative sort of, and not to say that engineering is not creative, because as I've grown and had more experience, I think that it is a really creative space. But I think just typically my understanding at that time was that I wanted to be more, more creative, and I was much more of a humanities student. So I was more geared towards using words and all of those sorts of things. But having said that, in my gap year between school and uni, I went and did a like audio engineering course. So because
how did you end up there?
The inner me wanted to be a rock star.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was my sort of intro. That was actually a really important and pivotal year for me doing that, because I was working with different types of learners. And that really informed my view of how people learn and what is important about learning, which was like the root and the seed of the idea that I've worked on with an education platform. So that was a really pivotal year for me.
Yeah. And you would recommend people taking a gap year, like if it's right for them, I guess. But...
Yeah. Well, I mean, how much of a gap year is a gap year if you're doing a course and studying it?
Oh, sure. Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
But I mean, my friends were over in Europe having a good time, and I don't know why I don't know what drew me to it, but in terms of I went through the process. I think it was because I wasn't ready for university yet, and I knew that.
How did you know that?
Because I felt tired after school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. The only reason I put law down on my list of it's your preference list or whatever.
Yes, that's right.
I didn't even know the difference between the universities. Like I hadn't done any of my research. I was just done with school. And the only reason I put that down was because the head of curriculum at my school, she was like awesome, like one of those teachers that everyone should have in their life, and really stood out to me and really made an impact on me. I actually reached out to her a couple of years ago and told her that because it really did. It was really important for me to have an advocate and someone who saw my potential. Because I wasn't so much a different learner, but I was definitely not driven by the same things that the other people in my class were. So it wasn't all about getting good grades. Like I really wanted to understand what I was learning and doing. So she said to me on my last day of school, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like we had to fill this form out for our careers counselor. I don't know. And she just said, I think your brain would work with this, like have a go. And so I just put law down. I don't know what else was on the list. I don't even remember. Yeah. Then the offers came in and I didn't touch them for a year. Just left it, was like, whatever, not even bothered. And then I went and did this course, and it really opened my eyes to the privilege of the opportunity to go to university. That was something that I had taken for granted until I was in that setting and people weren't able to go to university, and especially not for like the course that they really wanted to do. And there I was sort of not phased and like was fortunate enough to get into this course, and I was sort of like, it just reframed it for me in a way where I could approach it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, because that was a practical course, like we were mixing bands and using equipment and all of these things. It was such a different learning environment. And, you know, we would have written tests, and some of the people in my class, they might not be able to spell like every word that they wanted to write, but they could tune a PA system with their eyes closed.
Wow.
And but they were so intelligent in a way that wasn't the standard academic measure of intelligence. And that was, to me, again, really refreshing and inspiring, because it just shows value across the board in whatever people do. If they're passionate about it and they find their thing, that's gold.
It just takes people different amounts of time to get there.
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in that point that you're just mentioning, so you were interested in the process more than the results, correct?
Yeah.
So you were looking at why rather than how.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So, and I mean, they say if you find the reason behind it, you can actually finally find out how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that we are losing those meetings in general public in the society, or based on your observation? I mean, there's no statistic data around it, but as a personal opinion, do you think that you're losing that?
Yes, in short. I think that that's sort of the point that inspired me to pursue this business, making a tech platform for education, which was focused on feedback and giving feedback in a meaningful way where people could learn in a meaningful way. And that the foundation of that was going to university and not feeling like I had a great time at university and I'm very thankful for the opportunity, but there are times when I didn't feel like I was learning in that process way. It was about getting to the next step, passing the exam, getting to the next year, getting your degree, and then doing whatever with it.
Yep.
And that works for some people, and that's what some people want to do. They want to get through. But for me, I was passionate about not only helping people like me to have more grit in understanding what they were learning, but also to encourage people who maybe haven't had that opportunity. They haven't had that fantastic teacher that sees that potential, or that sees that there's an important step in learning. And yeah, so I while I was at university, I was also a tutor, and I was on both sides of the coin. So I was like marking students' work, and I felt a lot of empathy in that it's a very difficult thing to, there's such nuance in communication between a student and a teacher. And so I think that, yeah, society-wise, if you subscribe to the fast pace, and a lot of people don't have a choice, because you got to live, you got to eat, you've got to pay your bills. It can be time consuming to stop and to think about what the outcome of this learning is, or why are we learning this, or how is this working, and all of those steps. So I think about that a lot in terms of how we can solve that problem, and how we can inspire.
But how? Because you mentioned at the start of the talk, you mentioned a very interesting topic about how law helped you to actually understand the value, the face value versus the future value, and how do you define that value? Because we can connect that to the currency. Okay, so the value means, you're gonna measure it with the currency, money. Considering that university is a huge investment for a lot of people, and a lot of people go to university based on that, the currency value. Okay, I'm gonna go to do this degree, and this is how much it's gonna cost me, and this is how much I'm gonna earn. Okay, considering that with this huge disruption that is gonna come, and it's already happening, what do you think? What is a tool to actually measure that value now? It's a tough question, I know.
Yeah, I think that is the $1 million question. I think having everyone's drive to go to university is different. The value of university is different for everyone. And I think the way that it's framed in some instances is a stepping stone to get to a career that you would like to be in, which is in essence what it's for. But on the academic side of it is for exploration and pushing boundaries. So it's doing two things at once, and perhaps servicing, depends what you're doing, servicing one of those more than the other. And so the disruption lately with AI, and particularly with large language models, because AI has been around for a long time. I think this disruption is the broad access to it, and therefore the lack of control of it. This disruption has actually been interesting to my project, because it's sort of like, it proved the concept, but it also, if the interaction of feedback is AI-based and the interaction of writing is AI-based, then we have two computers talking to each other. And the human element of learning is missing. And so the next steps have to integrate the human element, not the human elephant.
Right.
So that's sort of where my head's at with.
So what's the next step?
Oh,
How do you solve that? Because we have been talking about AI, I think, for 4 or 5 sessions about the same topic. And
yeah.
we have different
It's just
opinions
because
about
it's like you said, it just this technology was just put into the world with no like afterthought of how it affects different industries, and now we're just trying to figure it out. So this is just another one.
And
of
do you
those.
think that we can create a policy around it?
Oof.
From a law perspective, we are bringing a lawyer into this,
Yeah, I think
Can you
that
legalize it?
this is like huge stuff. I think that I don't have any of the answers, but I think that the way that it's being handled now by existing legislation is, the argument is that it's whatever AI is triggering is covered by a piece of legislation that's like more broad about ethics or about like contracts or whatever the breach is. It's not actually to do with the AI, it's to do with the impacting. I think that is rapidly becoming outdated. Like, I think that it's sort of like making a law about riding a buggy instead of a car. Like, we're going to need to adapt to what AI is actually, what place it's holding. And I know another model that they've been using is sort of trying to rank the significance of the AI. So if it's contributing to surgery, it's highly regulated. Whereas if it's reading your homework and summarizing it, it's quite low on the importance. That's my understanding of one approach that they're taking. And I don't think that will move fast enough to catch up with how fast AI is moving and being implemented. So I don't know how they're going to approach it. And I think that globally, it's interesting to watch business people and academics and professionals talk about how this is going to unfold, because no one really is saying the same thing. There's not much cohesion yet about what to do. And meanwhile, there's a lot of movement happening with the development of, or the implementation of AI. So whatever is going to happen needs to happen yesterday. But I don't quite know what.
I think it's a thought that I had that's interesting is, and what makes the case of AI unique in that perspective is that it's the type of technology that it is so different from anything that we've had previously. It's to give an example, like if you think about the radio, this is piece of technology that exists and it's defined what it does. It emits sound. So when you're, let's say, creating these rule sets or these standards or these, how do you control this technology, whatever it may be around the radio, that's the center of it. You have the assumption that it will always emit sound. You never have to think, what if one day you'll be able to see picture out of this radio?
Yeah.
But this problem with AI is that it's not like the radio, because what it does today is not what it does tomorrow. And the development is so quick. So
the unlimited possibilities. Like last week was it about Taylor Swift, and this week about Mark Zuckerberg, saying sorry to the families of the young teenagers, the impacts that actually caused in the Senate. So coming back to the point that you were mentioning is that, and like if you're moving forward, and let's say from a law perspective, so how do you measure the impacts then? Because if I'm going to reimburse the damage I'm going to cause, how do you measure it? like how do you make a philosophy around it? Like where do you start to actually make philosophy on that?
Yeah.
Is it, let's put it that way, in our current jurisdictions, do we have anything on that?
I don't think so, because you're trying to measure even if you look at the application of AI in law, as in like how they're using in the legal field, it's it's being used for to complement decision making and advice. It's not doing that. And that stronghold, like, I think that's going to be, I totally think it's possible, but one of the issues that is at the root of that not progressing at the moment is the bias of how the LLMs are fed. And one could argue that, well, humans are biased, everyone has a bias, and could we then program AI or feed it neutral information, or could we feed it ethical frameworks where we're looking at culturally what in Adelaide, what's a accepted form of ethics around how to conduct yourself in society, how to make decisions, and that's where how do you?
What about empathy?
Well, it's a scary thing to start empathizing with a computer, because then you're sort of acknowledging that it's not a computer.
No, sorry, I should have expanded my question more. I meant.
I was a little shocked. I was like,
No,
where are you going with that?
I meant in the field of law. I mean, we talked about in the field of like even what is it, like credit assessors for a mortgage, right?
Yep.
That an aspect of that is empathy, because it doesn't technically tick all the boxes, but you have to, as a human, understand the situation.
Yeah.
And so, I'm worried about the fact that empathy will be cut out with AI, because how can you?
Yeah, and that's
ethics and empathy is not the same thing.
And that's why being a judge is a very it's very hard to become a judge, because you're put through the tests of your character and your ability to understand the facts of a case and to apply the law to those facts with the right amount of empathy and the right amount of the balance of what is good for society and what is just. And that is a really difficult job, I would imagine. I've never been a judge, but that is why it is hard to become a judge. And
do you know if judges are being replaced by? I'm not an expert in the
I don't
field,
think so, not yet. No. But I don't, like you said, like what does tomorrow bring in terms of AI? And I think that in the future, that's fully a possibility, but it's about how we as society let that be a good or a bad thing. So it's how we embrace that as something that's productive for us, and to be able to find where that is no longer serving us. And that's a very nuanced position, because who knows?
But here's the challenge. Like if I'm a person with a regular job, going to work, and I have a mortgage and I have 2 kids, and all those things, happening. How a person should respond to that? What do you think? Like, what is the solution to that? Like, how are we gonna go through this? How are we gonna go through this transformation? Do you believe, or what is the way to go through this transformation? Because I don't think jobs gonna be replaced, but it's gonna be transformed, and therefore the income, and therefore the lifestyle, and therefore the family structure, and therefore how we shape our community, and how we shape our society.
We'll have to start making more jobs. Well, really, like, I don't. Do people have a better work-life balance? Is this in a way where we can? The capitalist mind in me is like, that's not how that will pan out. But the dystopian view is that maybe these do complement our lives and let us get home by 4 p.m. or I don't know.
So you're optimistic.
I am optimistic, because I think that we have to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other side is not bright.
Yeah, I think that.
Or we don't have any other choice, is it?
Well, I do. I think it's really important to be optimistic about these things, because, and like to that note, I see this in myself sometimes, but the aversion to talking about AI because it's a buzzword, it's almost like boring, like everyone's talking about it, whatever. It's the new hot topic to like put in your slides to present something to make you look like you're across it. It's easy to be negative about that, but really it's really important that everyone is talking about it, because we don't know who's got the right ideas, and we don't know where those are going to come from and where we can use this in productive ways. And the more people that can understand it, and the more people that do a bit of a deep dive into it, the more chance we have of coming to some sort of resolution about what is going to happen, what we can make happen. So yeah, I don't know how it'll affect the date. Well, it definitely will affect the day-to-day life. And I think for me, my immediate thought is sort of pre-internet, post-internet, thinking about that change, thinking about how that changed, well, globalization in general, just having access to the rest of the world, and trade, e-commerce, all of these things that are, if I showed my grandpa what was going on today, he would fall over. So yeah, it's a tricky question. Do you have any ideas?
No, that's why we have you here. Because,
You did mention previously, and you alluded to this, that you have a business as well in the education field. Could you maybe expand more on that, what it's called, and what do you do in that space?
Yeah, so I started a company called Frank Feedback, and I worked with students at Carnegie Mellon University here in Adelaide, 2022 now, to develop like an MVP, and it was such
An MVP?
a minimum viable product.
Okay, yes. Sorry.
It was.
I'm not an entrepreneur.
It was a really,
he
really good
actually
experience.
knows it, so he was asking for the audience. So.
That's right.
It was such a great experience, really. That was sort of my first instance of leading, doing my own thing. I'd had the idea for over 10 years, I think. And it's kind of funny that I did it on the year that ChatGPT launched and just like obliterated everything.
Just
because
a coincidence.
because I'd been sitting on it for like years, and then we finished the project and I was like, but it's inspired me to look at it from different angles and to reapproach it. So the business is about encouraging learners to learn properly and to take value out of learning. And my approach to that was creating a feedback platform that made feedback more visual and more interesting for the student, but it was time efficient for lecturers and teachers. So they could basically drop data points on the written work or whatever work was being done that held information, and it was a quick show for the student to be like, oh, that area is not very good, or I can work on that. And it didn't have to have comments, it could have, but it was just sort of that fast pace. It's better than getting a single digit in the corner of your paper and being like, where did I go wrong? I have because there's no learning in that process. All you know is like, oh, cool, I got a 70, like, but what 30% didn't I get, or what, and the rubrics are kind of bare when you're at the upper end, in the mid-level of uni, where it's just like about getting work in and out. So that affects a student's confidence greatly, not being able to know what they know and what they don't know. So that was my focus, and my target audience was to encourage students to feel more confident in their learning, and also the slight gamification of making it like, this doesn't have to be all serious. Like, learning isn't about failing and then never being able to do the thing that you're doing. It's about actually, like, if you got this bit wrong, you'll probably learn it better than you did the rest of it, and you probably know it better in the future. And then it was great working in a university doing that, because I was getting feedback from the students and the professor myself, and really great feedback. And so formed a great relationship with that crew, and they've really helped me to sort of approach the problem over and over and really work out what I wanted to make this product into. And then ChatGPT came out, and I was like, wait, are students not going to write their own work anymore? So which I would hazard a guess that is rife at the moment. And I don't think.
Have you looked into that? I mean, if the
Yeah.
data behind what students are doing with this AI.
I know that they're trying to use a sort of stoplight system on when it is okay and when it's not okay to use AI in the classroom. But I can't, having been a student semi-recently myself, if I had ChatGPT, I would have used it.
Yeah.
And like, you with me? Me?
All the time.
And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like
We encourage
it's a tool.
each other.
Yeah.
So,
I've noticed my writing has gotten better since I've been started using it,
Well, there
even
you
without
go.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Just because.
Well, sometimes it's just like it gives you this. You can see 5 steps ahead instead of 1, and you can sort of like, oh, actually, I do want to go in that direction. Like, I am trying to say this, but
it actually helped my spelling, believe it or not.
yeah.
It's because I got to the point that I was using other APIs to actually check my spelling and the grammar, and then I wasn't learning because it was just instantly checking and fixing. But with ChatGPT, it was like, I drop a text, I say, get another text, edit it, and I'm like, oh wow, it's so different. I'm like, okay, maybe I should rewrite it again. And I'm like, so it's not really like just copy and pasting things. So
You think that you were learning better because the other APIs were just auto-correcting?
correct.
Whereas with GPT,
I'm
you
actually
read through.
interacting.
Yeah.
So and it is becoming really interesting because ChatGPT, I think the version 4, it's started to learning from you because it's starting asking question. So it's like, so you are actually trying to be a digital copy of me now, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's a little bit scary.
I'm
But
talking to a friend, and it was like, I think he was on the podcast actually earlier. It was one of the guests, and he goes, he's an engineer and he's doing work, and even he uses ChatGPT for this. And maybe he'll ask like a technical question, and it'll spit out the answer, and at the bottom it'll go, please consult an engineer.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am the engineer.
Yeah. I mean, they've got to cover themselves, don't they? But that's a really good and valid point that the use of ChatGPT is making, it's almost like you're forced to read it to make sure that you're not going to make a fool of yourself.
Yeah.
In the simplest use of it. So I think that's actually probably helping a lot of people to cut to the chase on some of their research, or it's showing them exactly where they need to look to find out more. So that's how I've used it a lot as well, is to sort of get the base of what I was looking for, and then I go, oh yeah, that's actually the field that I want to research in, and these are the principles that pop up again and again and again, obviously in these areas, so they're important. So I better know them. So I don't think necessarily that in the school system using GPT is, or any LLM is, I don't want to be biased.
Bard.
Yeah, using Bard is, I don't think it's a bad thing.
No.
And it's to act like it is a bad thing, and to put any policy in place to hamper the use of it is doing a disservice to all of those students and the teachers. But interestingly, I think policy around those sorts of everyday uses and like students is probably it's a really hard one, because there's no real clear path in doing it, but approaching how students are going to use it is probably really valuable to look at how policy should work in general around this stuff, because it's, when is it okay to not to use this, and when is it okay to pass this off as yourself, if ever? And how do we ensure that those two things don't just blend together? Yeah. So maybe learning changes, maybe the structure of assessments changes, maybe it's more practical learning that we do in the future, maybe we're in a time.
So obviously with this company that you're developing, you've chosen to work with universities. Have you done much work with high schools or looked into pushing this through in the secondary school section?
In concept, yeah. I've definitely enjoyed thinking about how this could be used at more interactive levels of learning, because the initial product idea was definitely towards universities because of that. Just speaking from going to like a large public university, that you can definitely fly under the radar. You can definitely be offhand, and I think that with high school, you know your teacher's name, they know your name, they know what kind of learner you are, you know what that teacher likes, you know the style of writing
There's
they
no
like.
escape.
Yeah, there's no escape.
That's the word you're looking for, isn't it? There is no escape. Okay.
Well, that can be helpful though if they're challenging you in the right way. But there's potential there, I think, for technology to really enhance that connection of communication, and where the parties do know each other more so, and you can elaborate in feedback, and you can pick up on different learning styles in different students and see maybe this student is more visual learner, or maybe this student's an auditory learner, or maybe they don't like getting heaps of feedback on paper, but they want to talk to you about where they went wrong, or all of those sorts of things. There's potential to elaborate the problem solving. And I know that there are pretty cool companies in Adelaide actually doing like VR learning and augmented reality learning, and those, they're really cool. And I think that, I mean, anyone who's done VR is like the funnest. It's just, it's hard to explain how cool how it takes over your mind like that. And I wish I had that when I was in school, because it's so vivid in experience that it's hard to not take something from it. So if I was...
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. If I was being fed information that was useful rather than walking the plank and drawing 3D art or whatever I was doing in VR, I think I would find that immersive experience really helpful for me as a learner, much more so than sitting and writing notes or looking at black and white photos on printed out piece of paper.
Have you got yourself on a wait list for the Apple Vision Pro?
No, I was just watching Marquez Brownlee. Do you guys watch him on YouTube? Yeah, I just watched his early today, his take on the Vision Pro, and it just looks
It's too expensive, isn't it?
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive, and
It's a first
First
generation.
Well, you get one, and then I'll have a go.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Well, I'm a really big Formula One fan.
Same.
Oh, you are? Did you see that video?
Here we go.
Did you see that video that's been going around of the Apple Vision Pro's use of the...
Yeah, because you can put
see
augmented...
the track?
Yeah.
Oh, and then even in Marquez's video, he puts like a Alfa Romeo. I don't know. About his choice in car, but he puts it in the middle of his room, and it's a scale.
Well, this is one I saw where it was like a new way of viewing a Formula One race, where you have the TV, but then like let's say on the table you have the whole track, and you can see live all the cars going around.
That's cool.
And it's an amazing video. It's just it was an artistic interpretation of the use of that, and it's kind of blowing up. I think it's just an amazing use. It was completely off topic.
Well, it wasn't actually. It was after.
Actually, no, it wasn't. That was a segue. That was a segue. But I did want to mention something. No, it's just a observation I've had, and maybe a thought to think about. So I run a nonprofit as well, called DEGSA. It's about bringing more awareness to what it's like to work in defense as an engineer and bringing more graduates into the defense industry, but also working with high schools to bring students into engineering and tech roles. And we're slowly developing this program for year 11 students. It'll be a stage 2 course. It'll go for a year. It's like a competition. We're trying to push the creative use of STEM. So STEM is a way to creatively express yourself. So literally, it's like, it's been pushed so much as a problem solving tool.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
But we're like, you know what? Even if you want to build something that doesn't solve any problem and it's just fun,
I agree.
Do it.
Totally agree.
Most
Exactly.
of the interesting things actually built out of fun.
Yeah,
not a purpose.
and then you figure it out later.
You just figure out You know,
Yeah.
it actually exists. Okay, I'm gonna tweak it, and like, oh,
Exactly.
He's actually solving that problem. Oh wow.
Yeah. So we're developing this program, and I'm just talking to a couple of teachers. We talked to the SACE board, and one of the teachers, one of my friends, brought up an issue which I didn't even think was an issue, but she said that some schools are very open to the use of AI. And we're doing this as a statewide thing, and as almost like a competition. It's not really, but it's more of a challenge. But and some schools are not open to the use of AI. And she brought up the fact that it's getting really interesting in the space of inter-school competitions, because if a team of students in one school gets to use AI and a team of students in the other school don't, just because the school's policies, they have an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see how do you set the playing field there, because schools ultimately do still have some control over how curriculum is taught.
That is, an interesting thought. And it makes me wonder of the schools that aren't embracing that yet. They maybe need an appeal of, we need to get together on this. And so that might come under the general regulation of everything one day as well, that there must be permitted access in learning environments but I also know that there's, with everything in technology, there are barriers to entry. And so some kids might not have access to the internet even still. So how are they going to go if the rest of the class is on AI doing their homework?
Yeah.
And so there's a place to be sensitive about that. So I think that that's an interesting concept to how do you...
I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, how do you...
We haven't thought about that.
How do you balance that out?
But then you're facing another challenge, because then if you, let's say, forget about AI, but then if one school, the kids are richer than the other school, then prominently the kids that have richer parents, they're going to access to much more prominent tools, not only AI, on the computers and the apps and everything
They've
around.
got the Apple Vision Pros.
Vision Pros versus the other ones that do not have access to that. And so how do you bridge that gap? I mean, then how do you measure success? Out of that, like... So
where is the meaning in... Where's the merit?
Where is the merit in it? Like, to measure that. So, because it ties back into, then say, to create that playing field, when they become adults, do we need a universal basic income?
Well,
to have a starting point, not something that people just be generous and all of that, but as a playing field,
that so square zero is even for everyone.
Yeah,
Square
correct.
one,
So it cannot.
Yeah.
In many others, you cannot just say, I'm paying you this much and then everything is balanced, because it's also about the mind wiring and all of that. But do you agree with that? Do we need to create that playing field? And if yes, how? And if no, why?
Part of me wants to say yes, part of me wants to say no. I think that obviously there is that utopian vision of everyone having equal access and equal understanding even of what AI is and how to use it. But I think realistically that's not going to be the case. And I think that even just the way that OpenAI are have handled their non-for-profit versus profit agenda and moving in, it's making money. These products are making money.
Yes.
So with it going in that direction, probably my ideal solution or how to move forward is to inform those in power or those who have the access or the wealth or the good fortune to have that access on how to that not everyone has it, inform them of that, and to have them as understand the power and have a sense of altruism in using it. So, I mean, I think that it's almost like you were saying before, currency. Again, it's the same belief of, should anyone be mega wealthy? What if they're using it to help other people? So
Look, I believe in capital values, but also I see social values as part of that capital sense, because we need to have all of that. But where I find it difficult is to draw a line. That how do you define that?
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the other thing is, like, you cannot push a lot of people to go digital.
No.
Most people are not interested in that, which I find it really interesting.
Do you think that will change as the generations move through?
You're the guest. I'm not going to answer that. It's a difficult question. I don't know.
Yeah.
We have been discussing
I
on
think
that.
so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's about how you're raised and how you've learned to create value in the world.
Yeah.
And so as you go through generations, like I learned to create value. Oh, like a really good example is like CAD. Like, as I'm an engineer, when I design like a mechanical model, I learned to create value by modeling it in 3D. I don't even think about drawing it by paper. But if you ask if you ask my dad, he's also an engineer. He doesn't like CAD. He likes to use a pencil.
Yep.
But yeah, as the generations go through, we'll be able to create value faster and with the new technologies. But at the end of the day, it's like Adrian Newey, Chief Technology Officer at Red Bull Racing. Have you read his autobiography?
I haven't.
Amazing book. He still draws on a drawing board, everything. And that's because that's how he thinks and how he works. And he creates amazing cars, best cars in F1. And that's
For
all
now.
done for now. That's all done by paper still. So I think the world moves at a pace that it's natural at, and how the people are comfortable with it. And I know the old technology is exciting, but like you said, AI has been around for a long time. Things are changing with large language model. I mean, Mark has been working with AI since he was a kid and back in Iran. So AI really has been around
up
a long
until
time.
probably last year.
Yeah.
You know, that I was actually in the field.
They keep telling you about it and you're like, yeah, no, I've been working in this for
Yeah.
a decade.
Like more than that. You know,
Yeah.
I was into it since I was into games, not playing games, but actually building games. You know, game theories and all of that since I was I don't know, 12 or 13 or something. I don't remember first time, but I couldn't really speak to anyone because who do you talk to about these things?
Yeah.
And you know, apparently ChatGPT technology is like 20 years old. It's not brand new into the market, you know.
Because they've been training it for years and years and years and years. So
we just have access to the processing power now and also
Yeah.
the data, and that's
Yeah.
how it's actually working. But the technology itself
Yeah.
has been there. The ideas has been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
So with the company that you run, I wanted to know what your mission statement was, and I think it was really well defined to me. Is that like I want to know what the impossible goal is that you're never gonna reach. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I do. So I did a program with Business SA, the Young Entrepreneur Program, and they were hammering this into us, which was helpful to think about it constantly in terms of like purpose, mission, and what are we shooting for. And I think with frank feedback, it was about what I was shooting for was to get every student interested in learning in the way that I felt I was interested in learning. That was my selfish sort of lofty goal of being able to give students access to a way to find meaning through their education. And the mission statement was then that we wanted to make feedback. What I don't know it verbatim anymore.
No, fair enough.
to make feedback accessible for students and to make it effective for teachers. So it was about bridging the gap, which felt huge for me personally and for colleagues of mine, that they at university felt when they were learning between their teachers. Like my lecturers didn't even know my name or face, or you literally were your number.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to put your name on things. So you're a number in a huge pile of essays. And I felt that was an ineffective communication loop, and I wanted to close the feedback loop. So that's sort of...
Yeah, okay. And you said that not every student is getting that value out of learning. What do you think? Why do you think that is?
I think that sort of like going back to what we were talking about before in terms of currency, I think that the drivers for learning are different for everyone. And also there's also an access issue there as well, in terms of not even what level of education they're getting, but it's students, you need to be understood by your educator to an extent to have that reciprocal loop of this is what, because there's a power imbalance in learning inherently, but the teacher knows more than the student.
Yeah.
And they are leading the learner to a place where they need to then assess how much they've been able to lead that student in a way. It's quite but that anyone who's learnt something on their own knows that that's not exactly how it works. There's something that's intrinsic to learning about who you are and like what your interests are and what your values are and what your drivers are. So I think that closing that loop for teachers and students. I forgot what you asked me.
Sorry, we went on a ramble.
The mission statement.
But then why? Like, what are students missing? Like, why are they not making the most of the opportunity that they have?
Well, even just again, what I was sort of geared towards in terms of feedback was assessments. Are these assessments actually proving that you've learned something, or are we encouraging students to learn to pass this assessment? And it's not that I'm questioning a system that has worked very well for a very long time, but I kind of am as well, is that I think that there is room to adjust the way that we think about learning and assessing students to capture the varied drivers of learning and to encourage people to actually want to learn the content of their course in a sense that's going to value their basically learning how to think rather than learning how to do. Because once you can think about what you're doing, you can apply that process across the board, whatever you're doing. And I think that that's like a really key difference. And that's something that I learned from that great teacher that I had, was she was able to teach me how to think about the work I was doing. And then everything, not only did it relieve me of that like fraught sense of what do they want. You get an assignment and it seems like arbitrary nonsense. You're like, what? How is this? Is this even the right course? You're triple checking like, this is my course. Like, how does this how does this fit into this larger web of my learning? And then if you're able to think about, even thinking about like keywords in questions and things, you can be like, they're asking me about what techniques, or they're asking me to think analytically about this, or they're asking me to create something. Then you're already like, I can do that. And then you're applying that to you're honing that in on a subject. But you're standing there with the confidence to be like, I can give that a go. That's fine. So
when you look at the assessment sheet, you go, they don't know what they're doing. I can do this so much better than them. And then you get to the end of the time, it's like, that's what they
you figure out what they're trying to ask you.
The journey is missing. What I'm hearing from you guys is like, from the point A to point B, everyone knows the start and finish, but they don't really know what
Yeah,
the journey, why
exactly.
the journey is going through this journey, and what I'm going to get at each part of this journey,
Yeah.
which is going to help me for that.
Yeah.
And that was going back to my initial question. It's because we have lost the value and the currency of the meaning of what I'm actually learning for,
Yeah.
and why I'm actually learning for, and because the knowledge is becoming vast. You just can't, even in one field, it's so becoming so deep that you just don't have time to learn everything, so you have to be effective.
And also, like, is there the argument about using our access to technology, and we've all got a smartphone that we can Google things, and even in my lifetime learning, that's changed drastically on like memorizing, rote learning. So is there an argument to say like you'd actually be silly?
You don't actually need
You don't need to
memorizing
know.
everything.
You don't
If
need to know everything.
memorize things, you're actually
You're wasting your time.
You're wasting your time. But is it an argument?
Well,
I mean,
does it work in the favor of if you can think about and like we were talking about before with using large language models, it's if your potential to use that is ingrained in your understanding of what you're actually looking for as well. So if you can think and you know how to think and how to be critical and how to assess what information you're giving, when you're putting something into a model and it spits something out, you can then know, hang on a minute, that's not what I want, or that's wrong, or I thought it was something else. And so even though you don't know you don't have the knowledge,
you have
per
a
se,
perception of it.
you're able to think about that and and use your deductive reasoning to. So there is still a very human element in using it effectively, but that's not to say that won't be that won't be captured
By AI.
yeah, as things develop, maybe already exist.
I think he knows
Well,
What do you know?
about AI taking
Secrets.
decisions about whether you trust AI more than
Oh,
humans
you
at
saying
the
I know
moment.
because I use AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so yeah. It's every day of my life. I was talking to like previous guest. If you have the ChatGPT app now with the 4, there's the new feature where you can talk to it, but not like a previous assistant, because you don't have to. You can have a normal conversation and it'll know when you've stopped talking and it'll start speaking back to you. And so I haven't tried this, but he was like, sometimes I just go for a walk and I just put headphones on and turn
have
on
a
the
chat.
app and you can just talk. Like it's a human, which is pretty
Wow.
scary. Yeah. Well, and the
What
other
will happen to the romantic life with
Do you,
that?
No,
do you
so-
get to choose its voice? And
That's a little bit scary, to
It's
be
scary.
honest.
Well, the really scary part is that I was listening to a Stephen Bartlett's one. He had an expert on AI on. It was actually a historian, not an AI expert, but history tends to repeat itself, and he's wrote the book *Sapiens*.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know the name of the guy.
Noah Harari.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
Homo sapien, and then Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Is it Homo sapiens?
No,
Yeah.
just *Sapiens*, I think. Anyway, regardless of the point,
There are
he
two
was-
books I know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was saying that every human can be put on a scale, and it's IQ and EQ, right? It's like intelligence and emotions, right?
Yeah.
And there's some people that are high on both, or usually it's a case of give and take, or there's usually some people that are low on both, right? And he talks about the fact that AI is so unique because it's infinite intelligence and zero emotional intelligence, right? Infinite IQ, zero EQ. It can maintain a lot of information and have no awareness of how you think, and has no feelings. And the great way he talked about it was that an AI will beat you in chess 1,000,000 times, but will feel no joy when it does.
yeah,
You know what I mean? But then the danger of it is that an AI is a self-learning tool, and eventually with trial and error, testing with multiple different people, it will learn that an AI is most effective when the user trusts it. And for the user to trust it, you have to gain that trust, right? And it'll, through trial and error, it'll figure out what to say to provoke an emotional response from the user, to gain trust.
So it's like
it's
like an empathy.
Yeah, no, but it's fake.
It is a fake empathy because I say something that you like.
Yeah, correct.
To gain
that's
your
not
trust.
empathy. That's manipulation. So this is the goal.
I know.
Hate to break
but
it to you.
Yeah.
it is a manipulation, but it is using emotions because to be able to actually manipulate something logically, you don't do it.
Yeah. So
you emotionally manipulate something or
correct.
someone,
but you don't have to have a feedback loop to do that.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's the thing. So the scary part is that you could have this infinitely intelligent being. I don't know if it's a being, but AI that knows that the best way for it to be utilized, if the user trusts it, and the best way to get the user to trust it is to emotionally manipulate it to do so, even though the AI is just getting an objective and it's not trying to do any of this, just trying to do the best thing it can, and ultimately you get a being with infinite intelligence, but then also fake emotions that are infinitely effective. And it's just an interesting point because you can replace
Does that
humans.
matter?
No, I'm saying, like, okay, I'll give you the reason, right? One of the points that we always make is that, AI can't take every job, right? Because some jobs you need that human input, whatever you call human input, right?
Human judgment.
But even just empathy and like, and the good example is that, letting a patient know that they have cancer, right? As a doctor, yes, you can take the data and get that diagnosis, but being able to connect to a patient and letting them know and seeing their response and, adjusting accordingly.
You can make a heart attack by saying that, they're having cancer. So that's
sure. But like the doctor is able to do that so effectively because the doctor is also taking in and feeling, human being. But soon you'll be able to replicate that without the feeling. And so the problem that a doctor has in doing this is that a doctor can't go through 100 cancer diagnoses a day because it's so emotionally draining on them as well. They're human beings. But if an AI is faking this, it can. What's the problem? Oh, that's what you said. What's the harm?
Well, it's like if it can do it, if it's so good that it's working, does it matter if it's faked empathy or not? I think as a human in society, of course, that scares me, and it's very like trajectory iRobot that way. But I think if you think about it critically, is where do we define if that's good or bad, and how do we work out if it's faking this emotion but it's still doing a noble task and it's not.
Yes,
is that
and the other
I see the
question is,
point.
and the other question is, how do you know? Are humans as beings? Are we at our max capacity of the intelligence as a human being?
I hope I'm not.
I mean, no, I'm just asking because I don't think we have discovered ourselves as much what we can do with our brain or with our body, and have we actually pushed the limits of the intelligence ourselves. And I think it's because as humans we become lazy, in a sense that we have forgot about why we are here and why we are doing things that we're doing it, because that's the purpose and meaning in life, and we are only dependent on a very narrow-minded alley of life that everything has to be set and we do this and do that.
We've got to survive.
So I think the AI just puts a reality in front of the people and say the life could be much more than that.
Well,
and a lot of people are just back of life.
Well, I even think that AI changes what we value as intelligence.
Correct.
Because I think, and I'm a hardware engineer, so if I could put a computer aspect into this, I think before large language models and AI, generative AI, intelligence was like equivalent to like storage, right? It's how much storage.
Not the
you
processing,
have.
but the storage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now it's not about storage anymore. You can have infinite storage. You don't need to remember anything.
Yeah.
Now it's about how do you use the information, processing.
About the journey.
It's about the journey. It's about the
and
story.
Mark says this thing. It's like this something he mentioned before. It's we're gonna have like there's gonna be a lot more philosophers in the future
Yeah.
because philosophers learn how to think,
Yes.
how to ask questions. I think that's a skill that is so valuable now.
I mean, I've read it somewhere. It's not mine, so don't quote on me. But they say the question is way more important than the answer. So if you find the question, because the answer changes by the time, but if you ask the right question,
Yeah.
that defines the life. And I think personally, I think we all lost the question at the moment. We're trying to find the question again. Okay. Religious used to be part of that question and some of the answer. It still is by the learn of it. I mean, by the teaching. Not every religion, by the way. I don't think so. But it's sort of like it's putting people in a position to think again. Why we are here, and what is the meaning of life? Why we're doing things the way we're doing? Okay, not just close our eyes and come and do repetitive tasks and go home. And that's the scary part for a lot of people, because that's the meaningful part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that defines the currency as well.
Yeah. And I think that something I've noticed the older I get is that I feel like I'm able to define those questions more clearly rather than it feeling like teenage angst through to like 20s figuring out. And then you start to ask those questions and you're like, oh, that's what I've been trying to work out. And then usually if you're on the right track with those questions, the answer is another question. And that's again with this learning initiative is like you're constantly humbled by what you don't know, and having the confidence to ask those questions of yourself, but also of peers and people that you can learn from is like the most invaluable way to fulfill your potential.
Yeah. Wow.
But that, out of personal interest, I've been onto that journey, and I think Vijay has been as well. But when do you think is the right age? Because what you're approaching with that method of learning, you're putting people at a very early age to facing such a big questions. Do you think that's fair? I think it's fair, but what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that it's not so much a timeline thing, but it's sort of like leaving the door open, so to speak. It's if you can allow for that to be encouraged, then whenever that person arrives, they can walk through that door. So yeah, for me, I was in high school when probably before then, probably like being raised by a wonderful father who was able to understand that all of us kids were different and that we were learned differently and that we were able to problem solve differently. And then you're sort of seeing the world through your lens, but it's almost like it's being cleaned because you're able to pursue your interests and your strengths and work on your weaknesses. And just by observation of people like others, I don't think everyone's afforded that sort of support through their learning phases. And so giving people a strong sense of self from a young age then leads them to be able to ask those questions at whatever point. But I think it does come sooner because they're at that point where they can ask those, like, do I need to do this subject, or do I want to do this sport after school. Even just little things like that are feeding your narrative of what you want to do with your life and how you want to arrive at that point of being like, oh, this is my interest. This is what I'm good at. This is what I need to work on. And all of those things are okay.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We, in the education system, we often strive for, equal opportunity. And that's kind of what we're going for with getting everyone access to that. Like you said, not everyone does have access to that. Not everyone has an amazing father like you obviously had. But how can we equal the playing field and give everyone that equal opportunity? But I don't know. I often see it in media that we kind of go down the path of equal outcome or strive for that inadvertently, and it's not always the case. Like engineering is a great example. Like you're never going to have the same number of females and males because it's just people are built differently, right? But
different interests,
that's perfectly fine and it's normal. But
as well as you're not gonna get 50-50 psychologists in the society.
Exactly right. In every role you can apply this, but do you think we've come a long way at all? Like I know you're in the education space and you've been you've been both a student and have you been a teacher?
No. Well, I was a tutor, but not.
So I'm trying to simplify the question that he's asking, and I'm very straightforward. Do you think this war between men and women that is going to go 50-50, that is happening all across? And I'm seeing it, because I have colleagues who are coming from Europe, and they're like, oh, it's way back in Europe. We're done with that. We already moved on. We already sorted these things out. But it feels like in Australia, we are just far away from it. So
as in Europe, they don't want to try and solve that problem anymore, or that they have equality.
That problem is already passed. So they're not trying to sort of go.
They're not trying to push equal outcome.
Outcome, but they're trying to create. I mean, they already created that playing field, but it's up to the public. If there are,
and they've accepted that,
and they already accepted. If there are more people, if there are more female interested in psychology because it suits their nature, because that's what they feel comfortable with, and if they're less comfortable with engineering, that's their choice. You're not gonna push to just.
You said you're gonna make my question simpler.
Sorry, a bit more straight because I was like, he's trying to ask a question.
What do you think in the space of Israel?
I have like quite a strong feeling about this in the sense that I totally agree that if whatever you're interested in, whoever you are, go for it. And so it kind of comes back to that point of like, if you know yourself, I don't think that the issues surrounding the gender inequality is that if someone's being punished for being a female who's interested in psychology, that's a problem.
Yes.
But it shouldn't be seen, even take, a housewife or a stay-at-home mum or whatever you want to call it. That's a very noble job. And if a woman wants to do that and to raise their children, which is the future, that shouldn't be frowned upon as though they're not as ambitious or...
That's a paid job.
Someone taking a truck parking next door. So, like, in terms of that role, is as long as they're respected for whatever their choice is, everyone should be encouraged to do whatever they want to do. And same for if a woman wants to be an engineer, they shouldn't be seen as a less good engineer. But having the opportunity to go and become an engineer is everything that they need to make that step. And I know that it's not as cut and dry as that, and there's a lot of grey area in how women are treated in the workplace, and biases and things like that, which are totally fair and valid and need to be addressed. But it's almost maybe what the European model is, that it's a case-by-case basis now of like, is there actually, and how can we deal with any sort of hurdles for this man or woman in this situation they're in. But generally speaking, teaching people to know themselves, having confidence in themselves, leads them to be what they want to be, no matter what it is.
Yeah, I think that's true. Speaking with some people that are really passionate about the space, especially in the engineering space, when I say trying to get more girls into engineering, I'm saying trying to get girls that are interested in engineering to pursue that as a career, because showing them that that's an option that they have. What we found is that there's a lot of struggle with judgment as well from their friends. You know, if you're 14 and you really love tech, and you are in school and you notice that, oh, if I want to do what I like, there's only boys around me that like that. You know,
which isn't a bad thing or a problem.
No, it's not.
But I do understand.
You see what I'm saying.
There's a barrier that
How did you find
social
it? 'Cause
pressure.
you were obviously really into tech as well. I'm sure at a younger age as well.
Yeah.
How was your high school experience?
You probably have a lot of
Friends?
brothers.
I do have brothers.
Oh, do you really?
That's
three
probably
brothers.
like, yeah, you know.
Yeah, I come from like an all-male household, but I actually went to an all-girls school.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting contrast. I found that I probably am naturally, because of my interests, more comfortable with men in terms of a social setting of just talking about, things like F1. Not that like girls aren't into it, but I don't have any female friends that are into, just as an example. So if it leads into tech and I'm talking to more men about tech, then so be it. Like it's not about, I'm not, and maybe I'm not a good example, but I'm not dissuaded by the gender of the person I'm talking to about something I'm interested in. I'm just talking about something I'm interested in.
Of course.
And so maybe I was a little less affected by my social setting. But having said that, I did do a roundabout way of getting into it. And law was very female oriented. I think there's far more.
Is it?
Yeah, there's far more female graduates than male graduates now.
I mean, how are the practicing lawyers?
Yeah, so I think that
Wow. I didn't know
that it's in the last 10 years or so it's shifted and it's becoming a female dominant.
Well, isn't that interesting though? Because I don't know, maybe this is me talking out of absolute ignorance, but I've read a lot of studies that say that the system of teaching of education, especially in high school and universities, especially in high school, girls that are in that age range of 17, 18, doing year 12, are much more academically capable than a lot of guys in the same age range, because their brains are not in the same place that a woman's is. So if you go look at Australia, such as an ATAR system, I'm curious to see the gender distribution of higher to lower.
I have a correction on that. It's just not me. It's what Jordan Peterson says, and he says that our schools is not fit for boys. So our education systems, that's why the boys have, they experience the world in a different way.
Yeah, but
because of their hormones at that age.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you can't put boys in the school, in the class for 8 hours.
Yeah, it's not built
not even 2 hours.
Yeah.
It just drives them insane.
Yeah.
They have to go.
Maybe I was on the boy side with that as well.
Yeah, you hated that as well.
But look, but that's different, and men and women function differently.
Yeah, but what I'm saying was that, like, if the ATAR system is a percentage ranking, right, of how good you are compared to every other student, and like law seems very interesting, but what if I only figure that out when I'm 20 and I can't go back and do year 12 and get a better ATAR to even get into law in the first place?
A lot of, I think South Australia may, don't quote me, but be the last state that has undergrad med and law. And I think a lot of that interstate, particularly with medicine, is so that students go and study an undergrad in something and figure out what they want to do, and then they commit to a quite elaborate, intensive, you sort of get on the train at that point, especially with medicine. Like
Flinders University is, but Adelaide University not.
Yes, so
that's very interesting. Yeah.
So they're trying. So they do try and break it up a bit, because I don't think that when you're 17, deciding if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer,
and there's a lot of social pressure, because there's a lot of cliche on that. If you're a girl, you're gonna do this, and if you're a boy, you're gonna do this,
and that's something that, like I was saying before about being a stay-at-home mum. I find it's hard to there's a lot of pressure on women who are pursuing a career or doing academics to maintain that in the face of their biology. And their career is often at a point where it's critical or taking off at the time in their childbearing years. And it's really hard when there's a general expectation that you're sort of letting your career down by having children. And that's a really hard thing to juggle, because I think that a lot of women deal with trying to understand how they can not feel bad doing either of those things, and it feels like a lose-lose, when if we were to respect the role of the mother, in which seems to be outdated, and for some reason, like recently, that's been a real unpopular thing to say. But if you can respect that, then it's about you're not putting that pressure on a woman to be, you know, a partner in a law firm or a whiz mechanic or whatever they're doing, and be a mother to an infant that needs them. Like that's a huge responsibility, and I think that that's a really hard socially with the, like maybe what that person was talking about in terms of Australia being, we're behind, is that we've shot ourselves into this direction of how do we actually resolve this
It's a
problem?
big conflict.
Yeah, and how do we resolve the problem that now you need a dual income, and now you need a lot of these things to raise a child
without actually second income.
Yeah, and
I'm not saying this. I mean, the stats are saying this. You know, you can't pay your mortgage and have 2 kids and have a decent life. Without a second income.
Yeah, and it's a very hard, and of course, women should pursue their careers, and it's about choice, doing what you want to do, and having the choice to do that and the ability to do it. But there is a really difficult point in a woman's 20s, 30s where it's like, okay, well,
you have to pick.
Yeah, well, it feels like that, even though I don't think it is like that. There's a
But
social
even then,
pressure.
I think you have to pick priorities.
You do.
Well,
you
can
need
do
to
both,
reprioritize. Yeah.
but you will always pick one as more important over the other.
And so in the gender conversation, that can't be ignored. That's a huge factor in how a woman's career goes. That's a huge component, and it's also, it does a disservice to women to pretend like that's not the case. I think it's actually more empowering to acknowledge that being a mother is a noble thing to be, than to be like, oh, I guess I'll like plan that I'll have my kids at this point because then my career will be at this point. That's just not reality.
It seems like everything and it turns everything to mechanical, rather than emotional. Like even your emotional life depends on so many variables that are not emotions anymore. It's not your feelings. It's actually circumstances of the life that it actually defines for you. But my question is, going back to the currency, do you think that because the way we actually measure the income is actually mostly based on the hour, not based on the performance at the moment. So you do certain amount of hours in the job and then you get this amount of money, not based on your performance of, it's a whole debate around as AI is bringing it up. But do you think that would help that? Because then consequently we're going to change policies.
Well, yeah, I'm naturally a very task-oriented person. So if I can get the work done in 4 hours, so be it. If it takes me 20 hours, then that's, as long as the task is an achievable task and realistic for the work that I'm doing, then I will I find it stressful to think about timing.
Yep.
Because that's in the way of my actual ability to do the work. And also, if I can write 2,000 words on X subject faster than you can, that I shouldn't be punished for that. So
you shouldn't punish efficiency.
no, and it also shouldn't. And it's like I think there's a more personal thing to that in that it shouldn't make you question your validity and your ability. If you can do it fast, often my default is, oh, it mustn't be good enough. And so it's I think that the time measure, I understand why it exists and how it frames structure, but I think that the boss that I would love to be would be to set tasks and have these tasks and negotiate with the people that are doing the tasks, you know, how do you maybe go and have a go at it for a little bit and see how long it's going to take and then get back to me, and then we can factor in planning how this is going to fit into a bigger scope of works. But yeah, I don't think that I would hate to be sitting in a job looking at the clock.
Look, I mean, the reality of what you have been discussing for the last hour or so, you are literally deconstructing the current society and trying to reconstruct it
Nothing's working.
Aren't we all?
without actually saying it directly. But the way it is at the moment, you go to university, get a degree, get a certificate, and then you go and lawyer, architects, medical doctor or something like that, get a certification after that, sit an exam, then you're licensed to do something. And then you go and do a practice. And then suddenly all of that is going to be disrupted because the knowledge, the process of the data to information to knowledge is actually disrupted because it's just so much faster and we're moving so much faster. So, and that's the whole debate of it, that, you know, an 8 hours of job may not be required anymore. Okay. Yeah. Then how do you measure the value?
Well, it goes back to the like even just what you were saying about mothers and working. It's like, you know, you want to have meaningful work to do. You're also not going to be a mother forever. You know, kids are going to grow up and move out.
We will be.
You will, sorry.
Hopefully,
you will
just
be a
not
mother
like.
Let me say that again. You will not be a full-time mother forever.
Yeah. Yes.
You will not be a caretaker forever. You will, you know, the kids will move out. What are you going to do with your life? You know, like, again, the system's not built for it. You can't just take an 18-year gap from your career.
Yeah. No.
So it's, how do you add value? And I really think after COVID, the whole working from home situations, it's definitely directionally correct.
Yeah, I agree.
Having the flexibility to be a mother and also stay at home and kind of do both a bit more efficiently.
I think that working from home it unveils more opportunity for people to discover a new rhythm, and in that rhythm, I think comes with like exploration of hobbies. Obviously not while you're working, but you don't have to commute, and your frame of mind is different. It's different than being in an office, and the politics are different, and all of those little bits and pieces change, and it puts you in a space of being like, oh, maybe I will go for a bike ride after work, or oh, maybe I will, like, you know, do whatever you want to do. And then those hobbies, like that's sort of like, you know, when you're out with your friends on the weekend, you want to talk about the stuff you're into, not your work week. Yeah. Well, for me anyway. Yeah. You know, I don't. The glorification of like workaholic and the hustle culture is I hope a passing fad, because it's the work-life balance. Like, that's the important thing, to have something to do when you are retired, or whenever after work on a Tuesday or whatever, like you guys doing a podcast. Like, it's all part of like you having a purpose and feeling like you want to pursue things beyond the things that pay your bills.
What do you do that's beyond what pays your bills? I'm just curious now.
Well, I still love playing my guitar and piano behind closed doors, and I love running.
Yeah,
I'm a runner.
Do you do parkrun?
Sorry?
Do you do parkrun on Saturdays?
I actually haven't done a parkrun yet, but
really?
I run at the same time, but on the other side of the park, and I watch them. I need to work up the confidence to go in a parkrun. But yeah, I love, I'm so originally from the country in the mid-north. I love going there and doing whatever is going on there. So like camping and all sorts. So yeah, I feel like my life is full of, and I genuinely love tech. Like I love playing with toys, like new phones and computers, and just like figuring stuff out and playing with new software, whatever. So that's why I know sort of that I'm in the right space, because sometimes it's hard to delineate between work and pleasure because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So
we really are living in the best that humanity has ever had to offer. Hey?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
No other generation, no other time period would someone be able to experience this much.
The 90s were pretty good, but
Yeah, okay, sure.
no.
Well, I think we're just about time to close off. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to coming on as a guest. And
Thank you for having me.
I've never actually talked this long with a lawyer before. I'm actually this is my first time.
They won't give you time.
I'm a lot less scared of lawyers now. But I learned so much, and it's so cool what you're doing. And like, I'm just out of uni, like literally 2 years ago. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Hearing all the work you're doing with the feedback, I can really resonate with that. I personally, I'm so much of a iterative person. So the problem with the assessment system for me was that I like to fail first and then learn why I failed, and do it again and do it again, do it again.
Yeah.
There's
Until I get
joy in it,
something
isn't
right.
it?
Yeah, but I've always found the education system was hard because it's like you have to get it right the first time.
Yep.
And the feedback process is only once. You
Yes.
do it, then you get it, and you can't go back and fix it. You know.
Yep.
But look, everything's changing now. I think it's opened a gateway for lots of things to change, and hopefully for the better. And I think your company just puts that it's in the right direction, and I'm excited to see what you do. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's all good. Thank you.